The chamber floated in the darkness between stars. A massive structure built from materials that could survive anything the universe threw at it. Inside, representatives from 400 different alien species sat in their designated spots, each one watching the human standing alone at the center, ambassador. Chen Wei kept her face calm, even though her heart was beating fast. She had known this day would come. For 3 months, the Galactic Council had been talking about what they called the human problem. Earth had been expanding too fast, they said. Humans were taking too many planets, building too many colonies, and growing too powerful too quickly. The older species didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. High Arbiter, Zexther, rose from his seat. He was tall, covered in dark scales, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed orange in the dim light. His species, the Zexkull, had been running the council for over 8,000 years. They were used to being in charge. They were used to being obeyed. The council has made its decision, Zexther announced, his voice booming through translation devices that made sure everyone understood. Humanity has violated the expansion protocols. You have taken territory that was meant for other species. You have built military forces that exceed what is permitted for a young civilization. You have refused to slow your growth despite multiple warnings. Chen Wei said nothing. She just stood there, waiting. She knew what was coming next. Therefore, the Council decrees the following terms. Humanity will immediately surrender control of 70% of all colonial holdings. Your military fleet will be reduced to a size appropriate for system defense only. All research into artificial intelligence will cease permanently. You will accept Council observers on Earth and all remaining colonies to ensure compliance. The chamber was silent. 400 species watched to see how the human would react. Some looked satisfied. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked almost sad. And if we refuse? Chen Wei asked quietly. Zexther's mandibles clicked together, sound that his species made when they were pleased with themselves. Look at your screens, Ambassador. Chen Wei glanced down at the tablet in her hands. The image showed space around Earth's solar system, except it wasn't empty anymore. Ships filled the display. Thousands and thousands of warships from dozens of different species, all pointed at humanity's home. The fleet was enormous, more firepower than Earth had ever seen in one place. 12,000 ships, Zexther continued. The combined might of the Council's enforcement fleet? We have surrounded your space. You have 48 hours to accept these terms and begin compliance. If you refuse, we will take what we are owed by force. Your species is young. You are clever, yes? Resourceful? Certainly. But you cannot hope to stand against the accumulated power of civilizations that were building empires when your ancestors were still living in caves. Chen Wei looked at the display for a long moment. Then she looked up at Zexther. I will relay your terms to Earth. I request the full 48 hours to receive a response. Granted, Zexther said. He sounded almost bored now, as if the matter was already settled. But understand this, Ambassador. The Council has been patient with humanity. We welcomed you into galactic society. We shared our knowledge, our trade networks, our technology. This is how you repay that generosity? With defiance and expansion? We've broken no laws, Chen Wei said carefully. You have broken the spirit of the law, another council member called out. You grow too fast. You take too much. You must be controlled, or you will become a threat to us all. Chen Wei wanted to laugh at that, but she kept her face neutral. If they only knew, she thought. If they had any idea what they were actually dealing with. But that was the point, wasn't it? They didn't know. They thought they understood humanity, thought they had Earth figured out. They were so very wrong. I will deliver your message, Chen Wei said simply. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. The trip back to Earth took 20 hours through the fastest jump gates. Chen Wei spent the entire time writing her report, making sure every word was perfect. When she finally arrived at Geneva, at the headquarters of Earth's unified government, she was immediately taken to the command center deep underground. The room was packed. Military officers, scientists, political leaders, all of them waiting to hear what the council had said. Chen Wei played the recording of the meeting. She showed them the images of the fleet surrounding their space. When she finished, the room erupted in angry voices. They can't do this! This is an act of war. We should evacuate the outer colonies immediately. Director General Amara Okafor raised her hand, and the room fell silent. She was an older woman, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Ambassador Chen, what is your assessment? Chen Wei took a deep breath. They think they have us cornered. They think we have no choice but to surrender. They're confident, almost arrogant about it. The fleet they've assembled is impressive by their standards. By their standards? Admiral Sarah Okonkwo repeated, a small smile on her face. But not by ours. Not by ours, Chen Wei agreed. Director Okafor looked around the room at the assembled leaders of humanity. Does anyone here believe we should accept their terms? Silence. Not a single person spoke up. And I suppose we have our answer, Okafor said. She turned to the communications officer. Send a message to the Galactic Council. One word only. The officer's fingers moved over the controls. Message ready. What's the word? No, the message went out immediately, traveling through jump space at speeds faster than light. It would reach the council chamber in 23 hours. One simple word that would change everything. But that wasn't all that went with the message. Attached to it, encoded in a way that only the council's top military analysts would understand, was a data packet. It contained coordinates. Lots of coordinates. Locations in space that the council's sensors had always read as empty. Locations that were about to become very, very busy. Admiral Okonkwo stood up and walked to the main display. She pressed a button, and the screen changed. Instead of showing the council's fleet around Earth, it showed something else. Something that made several people in the room gasp. For 200 years, Okonkwo said quietly, we've been preparing for this day. The council thinks they know us. They think they understand what humanity is capable of. They counted our colonies, cataloged our ships, assessed our technology. They made their plans based on what they could see. She smiled. And it wasn't a kind smile. They should have looked harder. The council received humanity's response in the Grand Chamber, where representatives had gathered again to witness what they assumed would be Earth's surrender. When the single word appeared on their screens, there was a moment of confused silence. Then angry chattering filled the room. Acceptable. One representative shouted, they dare defy us. Another called out. High Arbiter Zexther raised one of his forearms for silence. His orange eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. Then we proceed with enforcement action. Ready the fleet. What happened next would be talked about in every corner of the galaxy for generations. Admiral Marcus Chen, commander of the Council's enforcement fleet, sat on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays. He had done this before, many times. Young species always thought they could resist. They always learned the hard way. He expected this would be no different. All ships report ready, his tactical officer announced. We have complete containment of human space. They have nowhere to run. Good, Admiral Chen said. Begin standard intimidation protocol. Move the fleet closer to Earth. Let them see what they're facing. Usually, that's enough to break their spirit. The fleet began to move, 12,000 ships advancing in perfect formation. It was beautiful in its own way, a demonstration of power and coordination that took thousands of years of civilization to achieve. Then something impossible. The tactical officer shouted, we're detecting gravity signatures. Multiple contacts appearing all around us. That's impossible, Admiral Chen said, standing up quickly. Our sensors show empty space in all directions except Earth. Where are these contacts? Everywhere, sir. They're just appearing. On the main screen, space itself seemed to tear open, not with the bright flash of ships dropping from jump space which everyone in the galaxy used. This was different, darker, quieter, like someone opening a door that had always been there but nobody had ever seen before. Defense platforms emerged from nowhere. Thousands of them. They hung in space around the Council fleet like a net, except this net had teeth. Big teeth. Each platform bristled with weapons that made the tactical computer scream warnings about threat levels. Subspace emergence. Someone was yelling. They were hiding in subspace. How is that possible? Nobody can stay in subspace without special equipment. It tears ships apart. But these platforms looked perfectly fine. They had been sitting there invisible, waiting. For how long? Months? Years? The thought made Admiral Chen's blood run cold. "Sir, we're receiving new data from command," the communications officer said, her voice shaking. "They just analyzed the data packet that came with humanity's message. Sir, those colonies we were planning to seize? They're not real." "What do you mean, not real?" "They're decoys. Barely populated. The real human colonies are—" She stopped, her face going pale. "There are 600 of them. We only knew about 40. The bridge went silent except for the beeping of alarms." "That's not possible," Admiral Chen whispered. 600 colonies? How could we miss that many? The answer came in the form of a transmission from Earth. It appeared on every council ship simultaneously. Overriding their security systems like they weren't even there, a human woman appeared on screen. She wore a military uniform that Admiral Chen didn't recognize. Behind her, he could see what looked like a massive command center filled with holographic displays and hundreds of officers. "I am Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, Commander of Humanity's Defense Force," the woman said. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "You're probably confused right now. Let me help you understand what's happening." She gestured, and the image changed to show a map of the galaxy. Red dots began appearing, more and more of them, spreading across the map like a rash. "These are our actual colonies. All 612 of them. You found 40. Good job. That's what they were there for. While you were watching those, we built everything else somewhere you couldn't see." More images appeared. Shipyards hidden in nebulas that scrambled sensors. Whole fleets of warships that didn't match any design in the Council's databases. Research stations studying physics that the Council didn't even know existed. "For 200 years, Admiral Okonkwo continued, we've been preparing for this moment. You thought you were welcoming primitive apes into galactic civilization? What you actually did was give away your technology, your maps, your weaknesses, to a species that has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and extinction events. We're very good at learning. We're even better at keeping secrets." She leaned forward, and her friendly expression vanished. "You threatened our home? That was a mistake. You see, we've met bullies before. We've dealt with empires and tyrants and people who thought they could tell us what to do. We learned a long time ago that there's only one way to deal with that kind of threat. You hit back hard." On Admiral Chen's tactical display, warning lights exploded across every screen. The human defense platforms were powering up weapons. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the new contacts appearing on the screen. Ships. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Human warships dropping out of that impossible subspace, surrounding the Council fleet, sir? His tactical officer shouted. "We're surrounded. Enemy contacts on all vectors? Ship count is still climbing." Admiral Chen opened his mouth to give orders, but the human admiral wasn't finished. "Oh, and one more thing," Okonkwo said, and now she was smiling again. "That made it worse somehow. You might want to look at Earth's moon." Every camera on every council ship turned toward Earth's moon. What they saw made experienced military officers freeze in horror. The moon was breaking. Part, but not really breaking. Moving. Sections of the lunar surface were separating. Revealing what was. Underneath. Metal. Technology. Weapons. The entire moon had been hollowed out and turned into a weapon platform. 12,000 pieces of Earth's moon, each one large enough to be a warship on its own. Each one now pointed at a different council ship. "That took us 150 years, Admiral Okonkwo said conversationally. "We actually moved the real moon to a safe location and put that one there as a replacement. Nobody noticed. You should probably pay more attention to detail." Admiral Chen sat back down in his chair. His hands were shaking. In 40 years of military service, he had never felt fear like this. They weren't just outgunned. They weren't just outmaneuvered. They had been played. Completely. Totally. The humans had seen this coming from the day they first met the Council, and they had been preparing ever since. She tried to cage us, Admiral, Okonkwo said, and her voice carried across every Council ship. Humanity doesn't do well in cages. We break them. Every single time. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn your fleet around. You're going to leave our space, and you're going to think very carefully about whether you ever want to threaten Earth again, and if we refuse, Admiral Chen found himself asking. The human admiral's smile got wider. Then we'll show you what happens when you threaten a species that refused to die when the ice came, when the volcanoes exploded, when the asteroids fell. We're still here. We're always still here. The question is, will you be? Admiral Chen looked at his tactical displays, at the thousands of human ships surrounding his fleet, at the weaponized moon hanging over Earth, at the defense platforms that had appeared from nowhere. He thought about going. Home to his family, he gave the order to retreat. Admiral Marcus. Chen never got to give that order. Before his hand could reach the communication controls, his tactical officer screamed. Incoming! Multiple missile launches from the platforms. They're firing. The Battle of Seoul had begun. It would last exactly 11 minutes and 34 seconds. The Council fleet tried to scatter. Tried to bring their shields up and weapons online, but the humans had planned for this. They had studied Council military tactics for 200 years. They knew every defensive protocol, every standard response, every tactical doctrine that the Council taught to its officers, and they had designed their weapons specifically to counter all of it. The first wave of missiles didn't just fly through space. They disappeared mid-flight and reappeared inside the Council ship's shields. The defensive barriers that were supposed to protect the ships meant nothing when the attack came from inside. Explosions blossomed across the fleet like deadly flowers. How are they doing that? Someone on Admiral Chen's bridge shouted. Shields are still up. They're using some kind of spatial folding, the science officer replied, her voice shaking. The missiles are traveling through folded space. They're not actually crossing the distance. They're just stepping across it. Our shields don't register any penetration because technically there isn't one. Admiral Chen watched as 3 cruisers simply ceased to exist, torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Return fire. All ships, weapons free. The Council fleet was the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They had weapons that could crack planets, energy beams that could cut through any known material, missiles with warheads that burned hotter than stars. They unleashed all of it at once. For a moment, space itself seemed to scream with the amount of energy being thrown around, but the human ships didn't die, as easily as they should have. Their shields flickered and held. Their hulls, made from materials the Council had never seen, absorbed hits that should have vaporized them. And when a human ship did take damage, what happened next horrified the Council forces even more. Fighter craft poured out of damaged, human vessels like angry insects from a disturbed nest. But these weren't normal pilots making tactical decisions. These pilots flew straight at Council capital ships, their small craft moving at speeds that should have killed anyone inside. When they ran out of missiles, they used their guns. When they ran out of ammunition, they rammed. Admiral Chen watched in disbelief as a human fighter, trailing atmosphere and clearly damaged, deliberately flew into the engine port of a Council battlecruiser. The explosion took out the entire engineering section. They're suicide attacks. His tactical officer said. They're killing themselves. Sir, we're being boarded. Someone else shouted. Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Admiral Chen pulled up the security feeds. What he saw made no sense. Human soldiers had cut through the hull and were now fighting their way through the ship. That part wasn't surprising. What was surprising was that they were fighting in an atmosphere that should have killed them instantly. His ship's internal atmosphere was based on chlorine gas. It was poisonous to most species in the galaxy, including humans. He had read the reports. Human lungs couldn't process it. It should have killed them in seconds. But these humans wore suits with full face masks, and they just kept coming. He watched one soldier get shot 3 times. She went down. Then she got back up. Advanced medical technology, Admiral Chen thought. They have good field medicine. Then he watched her suit breach. Chlorine gas flooded in. She kept fighting for almost a minute before she finally collapsed. Get medical teams to those areas, Admiral Chen ordered. Take prisoners. We need to understand what we're fighting. But by the time his security forces reached the human soldiers, something impossible had happened. The woman who had breathed chlorine gas, who had definitely stopped breathing, was alive again. Her team had done something to her, some kind of emergency revival. She was coughing up blood and green fluid, but she was alive and already asking for a weapon. What are these things? Admiral Chen whispered. The answer came from his own database. His computer had pulled up Earth's history files, the ones humanity had shared during first contact. Information about human evolution, about their wars, about how they fought. Humans, the file explained, were persistence hunters. On Earth, they had chased prey for hours, sometimes days, until the other animal collapsed from exhaustion. They didn't give up. They didn't stop. Their bodies were designed to keep going long past the point where they should have died, and that was before they started modifying themselves with technology. Sir, we've lost the Eternal Authority, his communication officer reported. The flagship is gone. Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display. Where the Council's most powerful warship had been, there was now just debris and a rapidly expanding cloud of gas. The ship that was supposed to be unsinkable, that carried weapons capable of destroying planets, had been eliminated in the first 3 minutes of combat. All ships retreat, Admiral Chen ordered. Emergency jump, scatter pattern Epsilon. Get us out of here. But the humans had thought of that too. Sir, we can't jump. Something's interfering with our jump drives. We're trapped. Of course they were. The humans had surrounded them with those platforms that came out of subspace. They were probably generating some kind of field that prevented jump space travel. Simple, effective, terrifying.
Ow.
Then we fight our way out, Admiral Chen said. Form up defensive positions. Concentrate fire on the nearest human vessels. The Council fleet tried. They really did. These were professional military officers with decades of experience. They had trained for situations like this, but none of their training had prepared them for fighting an enemy that refused to follow any of the rules that civilized warfare was supposed to. Follow human ships that should have retreated when damaged, instead accelerated forward. Human soldiers that should have surrendered when outnumbered instead fought harder. At one point, Admiral Chen watched security footage of a human who had lost her weapon picking up a piece of broken metal and using it to fight 3 armed Kralix guards. She killed all 3 of them before reinforcements arrived. When those reinforcements shot her, she stayed down for exactly 90 seconds. Then her armor injected something into her bloodstream and she woke up, grabbed a weapon from one of the dead guards and kept fighting. They don't stay dead, someone on the bridge said quietly. How do you fight something that doesn't stay dead? The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 43 Council ships managed to escape, 43 out of 12,000. The rest were destroyed or captured. The most powerful military force the galaxy had ever assembled had been reduced to debris and prisoners in less time than it took to eat a meal. High Arbiter Zexther watched the battle. Recordings from the Council chamber, his orange eyes wide with shock. Around him, representatives from 400 species sat in stunned silence. This is impossible, Zexther finally said. How could we have missed this? How could we not have known? Ambassador Chen Wei's face appeared on the screen. She was back on Earth now, standing in front of a window that showed human ships moving through space. Behind her, Earth's weaponized moon was slowly reassembling itself, the pieces sliding back together like a puzzle. You missed it because you wanted to, she said. You looked at humans and saw primitive apes. You saw a young species that needed guidance. You saw something you could control. You didn't see what we actually were because you didn't want to. That's the problem with empires. They always think they're looking down at the people they rule. They never consider that those people might be looking right back up, studying them, learning from them, and preparing for the day when they'd need to fight. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. Had 200 years to be our friends. You chose to be our masters instead. Now let me tell you what happens next. The invasion of Council space began 7 hours after the Battle of Sol ended. It wasn't an invasion in the traditional sense, with massive fleets and planetary bombardments. That wasn't how humans fought when they had time to plan. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of Sanctuary Station, facility so hidden that the Council still didn't know it existed even after the battle. She looked at the holographic display showing the entire galaxy, with hundreds of red markers indicating human fleet positions. Target list is ready, her tactical officer reported. 217 high-value objectives identified. Primary targets are infrastructure, not populations. Good, Okonkwo said. Send the authorization codes. All fleet groups are weapons-free. Remember, we're not here to kill people. We're here to break the Council's ability to threaten anyone ever again. Across the galaxy, human fleets that had been hiding for decades suddenly appeared. They didn't attack homeworlds. They didn't bomb cities. Instead, they went after the things that kept the Council running. Jump gates exploded in carefully calculated detonations that collapsed them into their own gravity wells. It would take years to rebuild them. Trade stations that handled the flow of goods across the galaxy simply vanished, transported into subspace by human technology that the Council still didn't understand. Financial data centers suffered. Catastrophic system failures that corrupted centuries of economic records. But the humans were careful. Very careful. Before each strike, they broadcast warnings giving civilians time to evacuate. They made sure to target only military and government infrastructure. When Council security forces tried to fight back, human troops used non-lethal weapons whenever possible. We're not monsters, Admiral Okonkwo had told her officers before the operation began. We're liberators. Every species in the galaxy is watching what we do next. They need to see that we're better than the Council, that we don't rule through fear. The strategy worked. Within a week, 80 different species quietly contacted Earth's government. They had messages that all said basically the same thing. We were forced to support the Council. We didn't want to. If you let us stay neutral, we won't interfere. Humanity accepted every single offer. High Arbiter, Zexter watched his empire crumble from the Council chamber. Every day brought new reports of infrastructure failures, fleet defeats, and species withdrawing their support. The Council that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was falling apart in a matter of days. We need to negotiate, one representative suggested. Before we lose everything? Negotiate? Zexter's voice was harsh. With the humans? After what they've done, what choice do we have? Another representative asked. They've cut off half our trade routes. Our financial systems are in chaos. 3 of our founding species have withdrawn their fleet support. We're finished unless we make peace. Zexter wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The human attack had been perfect. They had studied the Council for 200 years and identified every weakness, every dependency, every point of failure. Now they were systematically destroying the Council's ability to function while being careful not to create a humanitarian crisis that would turn public opinion. Against them, it was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was exactly what a species that had survived for millions of years on a hostile planet would do when threatened. But Zexter had one more card to play. One weapon that humanity didn't know about because the Council had kept it secret, even from most member species. Activate the Stellar Purge Array, he ordered quietly. The room went silent. Several representatives looked shocked. Others looked horrified. You can't be serious, someone said. That weapon is forbidden. We swore never to use it? They've left us no choice, Zexter said. The array can ignite stars into supernovas. We'll aim it at Sol. When the humans see their home star ready to explode, they'll surrender. They have to. And if they don't? Zexter's orange eyes were cold. Then we destroy Earth and everything in its system. If we can't rule the galaxy, at least we can make sure humanity doesn't either. The order went out through secret channels to the array's location, hidden in a dead star system that wasn't on any public maps. The facility was enormous, built over thousands of years by species that feared what would happen if the Council ever truly lost control. It was designed to do one thing: End any threat to Council authority by destroying entire star systems. While the array powered up, something else was happening on Earth. Dr. James Adebayo, a human who had spent his entire career studying alien languages and laws, walked into Director General Amara Okafor's office, carrying a file that was 2 inches thick. "I found something," he said without preamble. "Something important." Okafor looked up from her desk. "More important than the war?" "Might end the war," Adebayo replied. He dropped the file on her desk. "I've been reading the Council's founding documents. The original treaty that created the Council and gave it authority over member species. It's all in there. Thousands of pages of legal language, most of it boring, but—" Okafor prompted. "But there's a clause," Adebayo said, and he was smiling now. "A challenge clause. Any member species can challenge the Council's authority if they can prove the Council has violated its own founding principles. If the challenge succeeds, the Council is automatically dissolved and all its assets are redistributed to member species." Okafor sat up straighter. "Can we prove they violated their own principles?" Adebayo's smile got wider. "Oh, we can prove it. I've documented over 1,500 violations going back 3,000 years. Sovereignty violations, unauthorized military actions, suppression of developing civilizations. In 7 cases of genocide against species that refused to comply with illegal orders. Is this admissible?" "It's in their own records," Adebayo said. "They kept documentation of everything because they never thought anyone would challenge them. They were too powerful. Who would dare?" Okafor stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see Earth's sky, now filled with ships from human fleets returning from successful operations across the galaxy. "File the challenge. Do it officially, through proper channels. Make sure every species in the galaxy can see it." Transmitted on every frequency the Council used for official business. Within a day, every species in the galaxy knew that humanity had formally challenged the Council's right to exist. The trial was scheduled for 3 days later in neutral space. Representatives from every species would attend to witness whether the challenge would be accepted. Zexter knew he had lost. The evidence was overwhelming. The challenge would succeed. The Council would end, unless Earth was destroyed first. "Status on the Stellar Purge Array?" he asked his military advisor. 72 hours to full power," the advisor replied. "Then another 6 hours to achieve firing solution on Sol." Ixter did the math. The trial would be over before the array could fire. But after the trial, once the Council was officially dissolved, he would no longer have authority to order the array's use. "Accelerate the power-up sequence," Zexter ordered. "I don't care if it damages the equipment. I want that weapon ready to fire in 48 hours, sir. That's incredibly dangerous. If something goes wrong during accelerated charging, do it." What Zexter didn't know was that human intelligence had known about the Stellar Purge Array for 7 months. They had found it while mapping secret Council facilities. They had studied it, and 3 months ago they had sent a team to deal with it. The team consisted of 8 humans in specialized armor, designed to look exactly like maintenance robots. They had entered the array facility, patient as spiders, and hidden themselves in maintenance shafts where no one would think to look. For 3 months, they had waited, surviving on minimal rations, staying absolutely still whenever anyone came near. Now, as the array began its accelerated power-up sequence, the team leader activated her communication implant. "This is Ghost One," she whispered. "Target is charging faster than expected. Authorization to proceed?" Admiral Okonkwo's voice came back instantly. "Proceed. The galaxy doesn't need that weapon." "Understood. Ghosts out." The human team moved through the maintenance shafts like liquid shadow. They had spent 3 months memorizing every inch of the facility. They knew where every guard was posted. They knew which systems were critical. They knew exactly how to destroy the array without killing anyone who didn't need to die. 20-7 minutes later, they reached the main power coupling. The team's demolition expert placed charges with the care of a surgeon. "Charges set, 30-second timer." "Everyone out," the team leader ordered. They almost made it. 29 seconds later, the charges detonated exactly as planned. Erase. Main power system overloaded and exploded in a cascade failure that ripped through the entire facility. Emergency systems shut everything down before the reaction could spread to the weapon itself, which would have destroyed the entire star system. The array was dead. It would never threaten anyone again. High Arbiter Zexther learned about the explosion 10 minutes later. He sat in his chair, watching reports come in, and finally understood that he had lost completely. The humans had been 3 months ahead of him, had predicted his exact move, and countered it before he even made it. "It's over," he said quietly. And it was. The trial lasted 3 days. But everyone knew how it would end from the moment Dr. James Adebayo presented his evidence. Representatives from 400 species watched as he methodically documented every violation the Council had committed over 3,000 years. On the second day, 53 species formally withdrew their support for the Council. On the third day, another 100 followed. By the time the judges announced their verdict, the Council had already ceased to exist in any meaningful way. "The challenge is upheld," the lead judge announced. "The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved. All assets, territories, and authority are to be redistributed among member species according to the original treaty provisions." High Arbiter Zexther sat in his designated spot, his orange eyes dim. Around him, other council leaders looked equally defeated. Some were angry, others just looked tired. Few seemed almost relieved. "What happens to us?" Zexther asked quietly. Ambassador Chen Wei stood to address the assembly. "That depends on you. Humanity isn't interested in revenge. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy. Just wanted you to stop threatening us and stop oppressing others." "Then what do you want?" Chen Wei gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing a proposed new government structure. "We want a real government. One with checks and balances. One where no single species or group can accumulate enough power to threaten everyone else. One where developing civilizations are protected, not exploited. One where membership is voluntary and rights are guaranteed." She paused, looking around the room at all the different species. "And we want everyone who's willing to participate peacefully to be part of it. That includes you, Arbiter. You made mistakes, but that doesn't mean you have nothing to offer. If you're willing to work within a system where you're not in charge of everything, there's a place for you." Zexther studied the human for a long moment. "And if we refuse, Zexther, then you're free to return to your homeworlds and live however you want. As long as you don't threaten anyone else," Chen Wei replied. "We'll leave you alone. But you'll be outside the new government, which means outside the mutual defense agreements, outside the trade networks, outside everything that makes galactic civilization work." It wasn't really a choice, Zexther thought, but at least it was being offered as one. 80 species signed the new charter immediately. Within a month, 300 more joined. The new Galactic Federation, as it came to be called, had one simple rule at its core. No species could be forced to join, but once you joined, everyone had equal say regardless of how old or powerful they were. The species that refused to join found themselves in an uncomfortable position. Without access to the jump gate network that humanity now controlled, without the trade agreements that the Federation offered, without the security guarantees that came with membership, they were isolated. Not oppressed, not threatened, just alone. Some adapted. The Zexkull spent decades rebuilding their society without the assumption that they were naturally superior to everyone else. It was hard, but they managed. Eventually, they applied for Federation membership and were accepted. Others isolated themselves completely, refusing to have anything to do with the new order. The Federation left them alone, just as promised. A few tried to rebuild their own power bases and threaten their neighbors. Those attempts ended quickly, when human fleet groups appeared in their space with a simple message: "Stop, or we'll stop you." Nobody wanted to test whether the humans were bluffing. They had learned that humans generally didn't bluff. 6 months after the Council's dissolution, Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood in what used to be the Council chamber, but was now the Federation Assembly. The place had been remodeled, instead of a hierarchical setup with a council above everyone else. All species now sat in a circle. Equal, that was the point. Her aide, a young officer named Marcus Chen, stood beside her.
Admiral, do you think?
They'll ever forgive us for what we did. Kunko watched as representatives from dozens of species debated a trade agreement. They were arguing, yes, but it was productive argument. Nobody was being threatened. Nobody was being forced. Forgiveness isn't what matters, she said. Understanding is what matters. For 10,000 years, the Council ruled through fear and power. They told developing species like us that we needed to be controlled, that we were too young and too dangerous to be trusted. We proved them wrong. How did we prove them wrong? Chen asked. We destroyed their fleet. We tore down their government. We're probably the most dangerous species in the galaxy now. Kinko smiled. That's exactly how we proved them wrong. We had the power to conquer the galaxy. We could have set ourselves up as the new council, ruling everyone through fear just like they did. But we didn't. We offered something better. That's the difference between being powerful and being dangerous. She pointed at the assembly floor where a representative from a species that had only achieved spaceflight 5 years ago was making a proposal that species 10,000 years older were actually listening to. We gave them something the council never did, Okenko continued. We gave them a choice, a real choice, not the illusion of it. That's what the council never understood. You can't build a lasting civilization by forcing people to obey. You build it by giving them reasons to cooperate. And what if someone decides not to cooperate? What if another threat rises? Then we'll deal with it, Okenko said simply. That's what we're good at, dealing with threats. But we'll do it the right way. We'll exhaust every peaceful option first. We'll give people chances to change. And only when there's no other choice will we show them why you don't threaten Earth. On Earth itself, people were still processing what had happened. For 200 years, they had lived with the knowledge that their civilization was secretly preparing for war. Now that the war was over and won, they had to figure out what came next. Director General Amara Okafor addressed the planet from the rebuilt Geneva headquarters. We stood at a crossroads, she told the billions watching. We could have become the very thing we fought against. We could have used our power to dominate others like the Council dominated us. That would have been easy. It would have been simple. It would have been wrong. She paused, letting her words sink in. Instead, we chose the harder path. We chose to build rather than conquer. We chose to offer partnership rather than demand submission. We chose to be the species that helps other species rise rather than the species that keeps them down. That's who we are. That's who we've always been at our best. Yes, we can fight. Yes, we can destroy. But we can also build. We can create. We can lift up others. And that's what we're going to do. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. On 1,000 different worlds, people of hundreds of species watched and wondered if the humans really meant it. If this was truly different from every other change of power the galaxy had seen, time would tell. But the early signs were good. 5 years later, the Galactic Federation had grown to include 387 species. The Jumpgate network had been rebuilt and expanded, now open to everyone regardless of whether they could pay. Trade flourished. 3 species that had been on the verge of extinction due to environmental collapse received aid that saved them. 2 wars were prevented through diplomatic intervention. The galaxy was slowly and imperfectly becoming something better. Admiral Okenko, retired, stood on a balcony on Earth, looking up at the stars. Her old aide, now Admiral Marcus Chen, stood beside her. Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? He asked. Every day, Okenko admitted. We killed a lot of people in that war. We destroyed a government that had stood for 10,000 years. We changed the galaxy forever. Of course I wonder if it was right. But I look up there, she gestured at the sky, and I see ships from 100 different species moving peacefully. I see species that were enemies working together. I see young civilizations being protected instead of exploited. And I think, yeah, we did the right thing. She turned to look at Chen. The Council thought they could cage humanity. They thought they could tell us where to go, what to do, how to live. They forgot that humans have been breaking out of cages since the first human decided they didn't want to be prey anymore. We don't do well with limits that someone else sets for us. So what do we do well with? Okinko smiled. Challenges. Give us a problem, and we'll solve it. Give us something that seems impossible, and we'll figure it out anyway. Tell us something can't be done, and we'll do it just to prove you wrong. The Council's mistake wasn't threatening us. Their mistake was thinking that because they were older and more advanced, that meant they were better. She looked back up at the stars. They learned the hard way that age and advancement don't mean much if you've stopped growing. If you've stopped adapting, if you've become so comfortable with power that you forget why you needed to be powerful in the first place. The Council ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years and thought that meant they always would. They forgot that empires fall, that power shifts, that nothing lasts forever. Except humans, apparently, Chen said with a slight smile. Except humans, Okunko agreed. We've been dying out for millions of years. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, plagues, wars, famines. Everything the universe could throw at us. And we're still here. Still adapting. Still surviving. Still growing. She put her hand on Chen's shoulder. That's what the Council never understood. They thought they were facing another species that wanted to rule. What they were actually facing was a species that just wanted to be free. And there's nothing more dangerous than something fighting for its freedom. Nothing more unstoppable than something that refuses to die. Above them, a transport ship from a species that had been freed from Council oppression flew past. It was heading to a new colony, one of hundreds being established in space that used to be restricted. Freedom of movement. Freedom of choice. Freedom to grow and thrive without fear. That's what humanity had fought for. Not to rule. Not to dominate. Just to make sure that everyone had the same chance humans had. Fought so hard to keep for themselves? The Council had overstepped the line by trying to take that freedom away, so humanity erased the semantic Council and built something better from the ashes.